and welcome to the 5th edition of the Goa Arts and Literary Festival. I'm Giselle, your host for today, and we have Ellen van Neerven, a young author, with us today. So, I'd like to know what inspired you to become an author?
I think becoming a writer was very much inspired by my family life and how I was brought up. So my father was born in the Netherlands, and he passed on his love of football to me. So I became a football player. But then my mother, who's an Aboriginal woman, our family are from the Mullinjali. They're from the Bow Desert in Queensland, in Australia. She always worked in libraries. So as a child, I would go and sit in the library when I had school holidays and I had nowhere to go. I would go sit in the library where my mother worked, and obviously was surrounded by books. Yeah, and so really loved reading as a kid, and also because I felt I was a really shy kid and I didn't really talk much, and so I found a whole world in books. Kind of the reason why I was so shy was also because I was the only Aboriginal kid at my school. And so I was picked on a lot, but I learned to keep my mouth shut and try and keep a low profile. And so I would be reading, in the lunch break, and also playing football, because that was another way I could express myself.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So I read somewhere a particular quote that you said. Fiction is the deepest conversation you can have. I found that really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I talk about that because of my friend Larissa Barrett. She talks to me about how she's a lawyer, but she also chooses to write fiction because she thinks that sometimes the facts don't speak to people's hearts as much as a good story does.
Correct.
So there is, I think that sometimes you can express something in fiction more powerfully than you can in any other medium. Correct. And that's because you're sitting inside a character's lives, you're walking in their shoes, and you're seeing the world through their eyes.
Right.
And that's the most powerful way of building empathy for these characters.
Okay, that's amazing. I would like to know a little bit about your work. You worked at the library in Queensland on a project called Black and White. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your post was in it?
Black and White is a very unique project. It's the only project of its kind in Australia, and we think maybe the world. And it's about Aboriginal writers and Aboriginal editors. We have a strong continuum of Aboriginal writers that the last 30 years we've started to get our voices out there. We don't have anyone working in those other positions. Correct. And it's the same around all sorts of arts. We have visual artists, we have filmmakers and actors, but we don't have producers and those other roles. And so it was, it's motivated by the need to preserve our own voice and our authenticity through writing. So working with an editor, that transferal of the transformation that manuscript has
makes a difference.
Yeah. So I was trained both formally and informally with accreditation at university, but also on the job training to become an editor. And now this session, the project rolls on, and I will be training 2 other Aboriginal editors, and we're sort of forming a pool of practitioners working in the industry, not just writers, but to hopefully transform the world and take over.
So being an editor, how has it impacted your writing? Does it make much of a difference?
Yeah, it does. I think it's hard not to, because editing is really about a close concentration on the page, looking at each word very carefully and why it should be there, and so when I write, sometimes it is a bit hard to just you let it flow, you know, you're
correct.
not thinking too much. But it also allows me to have such a great perspective on all sorts of writing and how my work fits with that. So it's a blessing and a curse to us to be an editor and a writer.
So tell me a little bit about your book, the story and concept behind it. There are 3 parts to it. So the first part was about how his family gets to know about their grandmother. The second part, quite a lot of specialists told you to have it as a book on its own, but you chose not to. So can you tell us why?
Yeah, so my book, it came out a couple of months ago, and people particularly seem to be fond of the second part, which you mentioned that it's a novella, and it's a whole, you know, it's set in the future. So I set up this whole world that, you know, that Australia has changed so much in the last few years, through a new government. Through Australia has become a republic, and we have a president instead of a prime minister, and we're going through a lot of changes. And there's also an element of fantasy in it. Well, whether it's fantasy or real is up to the readers. You know, they can make up their own mind. But there's these creatures that are emerging from the water, and they're part plant, part people. So they're similar to a mangrove in that they have roots, and they keep their roots in the water, but they also can walk and live as people if they want to.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think creating such a big world, I think the readers did want, you know, they do want more. They want it to be a whole book, but I felt like it
best fitted in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've picked 3 elements to describe each of the parts, like this: heat, light, and water. Why did you pick these? Is there a particular personal meaning to it?
To be honest, the title of the book, Heat and Light, it comes from, you know, there's no water in the title, but it comes from a Tracy Chapman song. I don't know if you know the American folk song, folk singer Tracy Chapman, but her music, you know, was playing in the background while I was writing, and she has a particular lyric in her song "Smoke and Ashes" that has heat and light in it, and it just seemed to fit the mood of what I was writing. And when I started to build the novel, I thought, wow, I can see that there's 3 distinct parts here, but I don't know how to frame them to make it feel like a complete whole, but to also show that there's these different sides of story I was telling, and to use those words, I think, really captured the essence of those individual parts.
That's amazing. Any message for our young writers out there? Anything you'd like to tell them?
Be brave, guys. You know, write what's in your heart. You know, don't feel like you need to conform or to write something to be clever, but just do something that you love, and also read. You know, read widely. You know, I read a lot of Australian work, so you can read your local texts and your local authors, but also read globally. You know, find those texts that speak to you.
So how are you liking the Goa Arts and Literary Festival?
I love it. It's fantastic. I've never had so much fun. There's, you know, the sessions are very informative, but there's also an element of, you know, spontaneity and you know, having fun and really just celebrating art and literature, and I'm really amazed how many people are interested in this. You know, in Australia, I think we have smaller audiences than this. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. That's all we have for now, so stay tuned for some more interviews.